Welcome to The Last Peaceful Line, a video on judicial review and the grand jury. A constitutional nation survives only when power is accountable to the law, and citizens defend constitutional integrity through lawful mechanisms. There comes a point when people realize the fundamental structure of their nation is breaking down. Citizens may notice agencies acting beyond authority, courts avoiding constitutional questions, and rights being treated as obstacles instead of guarantees. The core realization is that if the people themselves do not defend constitutional order, nobody will. This highlights the deep importance of two constitutional mechanisms, judicial review and the grand jury. These are constitutional safety valves designed to prevent arbitrary power from consuming the nation. Judicial review is the constitutional boundary line. It allows citizens to bring government conduct before a superior court to ask if the authority had the lawful power to act. This question is critical because governments naturally expand power unless restrained. Judicial review exists because power must remain subordinate to law. This principle developed through the Magna Carta, common law, and parliamentary restraints. Judicial review keeps public authorities within the lawful boundaries that created them. Canada inherited this constitutional framework. The Constitution Act of 1867 established responsible government, divided powers, and independent superior courts. The preamble declares Canada is founded upon a constitution similar to that of the United Kingdom, making constitutional restraint foundational. The courts act as guardians. Their role is not to govern, but to ensure that government remains lawful. This involves assessing jurisdiction, due process, fairness, and whether actions align with constitutional principles. Without judicial review, constitutional boundaries eventually become meaningless. Constitutional decline happens incrementally. When public authorities can violate limits without challenge, these violations expand. An unlawful regulation becomes normal, an ignored abuse becomes precedent, and an emergency measure can become permanent. Citizens matter because courts cannot act unless cases are brought before them. Citizens must file applications, gather evidence, and challenge unlawful conduct. Constitutions do not defend themselves. Only a population willing to insist on lawful government can preserve constitutional integrity. Judicial review allows citizens to lawfully confront overreach using evidence, law, open courts, and constitutional principles instead of violence. It remains one of the last peaceful lines of defense against arbitrary government power. The grand jury is the people's constitutional watchdog. Free societies recognize that governments sometimes refuse to investigate themselves. The grand jury developed as a mechanism for direct citizen participation in the administration of justice. Historically, the grand jury had three major functions: investigating serious public offenses, investigating government misconduct and abuse of authority, and protecting people from arbitrary prosecution. It represented the direct participation of the people in constitutional accountability. The grand jury matters because a constitutional system cannot survive if governments investigate themselves, prosecutors answer politically, or public corruption becomes untouchable. The grand jury represents the direct participation of the people in constitutional accountability. A grand jury examines questions such as whether serious wrongdoing or abuse of public office has occurred, and if authorities failed to act. Historically, grand juries reviewed evidence, heard testimony, and compelled the production of documents. Its purpose was accountability. Every constitutional system requires counterweights. If all investigative power rests inside the state, corruption can become self-protecting. The grand jury historically acted as a constitutional bridge between the people, the courts, and the justice system. Its core principle was simple: no person is above the law. Judicial review restrains unlawful power and maintains legal boundaries. The grand jury examines misconduct and failures of accountability, protecting public accountability. Together, they create constitutional pressure against arbitrary government power. The future depends on constitutional courage. The greatest danger to a constitutional society is not disagreement, but public surrender. The solution is constitutional courage, not violence or chaos. Constitutional courage in practice involves using the courts, defending due process, demanding accountability, educating the public, exposing abuses, and refusing to normalize arbitrary power. A critical warning is the gradual transfer of practical authority away from the constitutional crown towards centralized executive authority. The crown represents constitutional order, the rule of law, and a government serving the people under constitutional limits. This balance matters because the crown forms part of the constitutional restraint on arbitrary executive power. When offices meant to restrain partisan government collapse, power centralizes toward executive control. Constitutional restraint is essential for preserving the rule of law. It's a fundamental principle that no person or branch of government is above the law. Accountability ensures this principle is upheld. Both judicial review and the grand jury are tools for maintaining that accountability and constitutional order. They provide lawful, peaceful means for citizens to defend their nation's foundational principles.